Hello there, this is the lesson read aloud recording for lesson 4.01 and we're starting a new unit, so let's read the unit introduction. If you were a white male born in the new United States in 1776, you would probably have grown up on a small farm, had little or no formal schooling, and would not have been able to vote in the nation's early elections. If you traveled, it was probably on foot, and your religion was probably that of your neighbors. Your son, born in 1815, however, might have led a very different life. He might stay on the farm or go to the city or go out west. He would go to school and vote. He might travel by steamboat, canal, or train, and he might choose one of the many new religious denominations. Life in America was changing, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. The Industrial Revolution began in England in the late 1700s when inventors discovered how to harness the energy of moving water to power textile looms. With the help of the steam-powered engine and innovations in transportation, England became an industrial powerhouse by 1800. But the United States was not far behind. With abundant land and natural resources, but relatively few people, early American inventors used scientific knowledge for practical labor-saving purposes. American industry, centered in New England, was built on the inventions of the British, as well as innovations from American businessmen and inventors who emphasized efficiency, uniformity, and streamlining. Okay, goals for this lesson. Identify American inventors and innovators of the late 18th and early 19th centuries and their accomplishments. Describe the growth of new industries in the United States after the War of 1812. Recognize that the Industrial Revolution began in England's textile industry during the late 1700s. Describe the growth of new industries in the United States after the War of 1812, the reasons for the growth, and the influence of geography on where these new industries developed. Explain the advantages and disadvantages of factory work for young women in the early 19th century. Okay, so don't forget to get your reading guide and lesson answer key, and it looks like there's also the Geography of Industry sheet you need as well. So today we're going to start reading pages 258 through 270. Okay. Oh, there's also a warm-up activity. Okay, so let's look at the warm-up before we begin the reading. Today you'll read how life for the average American began to really change in the early 1800s. The reasons behind these changes can be traced back to a revolution that began in England shortly before America's own political revolution, the Industrial Revolution. One invention in particular, the steam engine, produced tremendous amounts of energy and powered textile looms, pumps, boats, trains, and other machinery. View an animation that shows how this invention, so important to the rise of industry both in England and America, works. And this is where you can click on that to look at it. And then it says write your history journal, which you're not required to do. Your history journal is just your own note-taking that you do. So if you can do a reflection on this if you wish to help understand the innovations of this Industrial Revolution time period. Okay, but now let's go on to the reading. And here's the beginning, page 258. It's the beginning of a new chapter in the textbook. And we have a timeline starting with steamboat. Then we have the War of 1812. We have a timeline about a mechanized cotton processing factory. Then the Erie Canal construction begins. So lots of innovations in technology. Construction of the B&O Railroad begins. Samuel Morse sends the first telegraph message. So as you can see, we're going to be reading about inventions and innovations. Okay. Beginning an industrial revolution and a market economy. Sometime around 1825, strange things began to happen in the small town of Bathia, New York. Located in the far western reaches of the Empire State, that's New York, Bathia was a remote community in what was still frontier country, but the arrival of the Erie Canal changed the lives of the residents of Bathia. Before the arrival of the Erie Canal, it took weeks for Bathia's farmers to transport the wheat to potential buyers in New York or Philadelphia. By that time, their wheat would have spoiled, so Bathians harvested only as much as their families needed to get by. They produced the other necessities of life, clothing, furnishings, candles, nails, horseshoes at home or in local shops. With the coming of the canal, however, Bathia's farmers could transport their wheat more quickly. They could sell their wheat to buyers in Philadelphia and use their earnings to purchase cheaper manufactured goods from East Coast and European factories. Prices of home furnishings fell dramatically. A wall clock that cost $60 in 1800 now sold for $3, where a $50 mattress now cost only $5. Though they live more than 350 miles away from the Atlantic Ocean, the people of Apia can now buy fresh Long Island oysters. The citizens of Apia enjoyed not only fresh goods, but also fresh news. Reports from New York City and Washington, D.C. took days rather than weeks to arrive. Farmers who once produced just enough food for their families to live on now labored to produce large surpluses to sell to Eastern markets. They used their profits to buy new factory-made goods from Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and even Europe. Almost overnight, the people of Apia, as well as the people in other once remote American communities, now linked by new forms of transportation and communication, made the transition from a subsistence economy to a market economy. In a substance made this transition from a subsistence economy to a market economy. In a subsistence economy, individual families produce most of their food, clothing, and finished goods at home. They have little motivation to produce more than they can consume. Without the ability to transport their goods to distant markets, they cannot earn a profit on whatever surplus they produce. In a market economy, however, people produce goods, such as agricultural products, for sale. They use the cash they earn from those sales to purchase other goods, such as clothing and furniture. In a market economy, farmers or artisans specialize their production in one or two areas, such as growing wheat or making furniture, and they produce as much as possible. The more they produce, the more they can sell, and the more they sell, the more they earn. The more money they earn, the more products and luxuries they can buy. In the early 19th century, the United States underwent a dramatic economic growth as new developments in industry, transportation, and communication enlisted more Americans in a growing market economy. As more people became connected to the market economy, the rhythms of life changed. Though America remained an overwhelmingly rural country, its cities began to grow. While most people still earned their livings as farmers, factories were becoming an important part of American life. The growing transportation network connected distant parts of the young republic, making it possible for wheat farmers in western New York to feel stronger bonds of kinship with working men in Philadelphia or rice planters in South Carolina. Much more change than just the price of clocks and mattresses. Step by step, the United States was beginning to be a modern, industrialized, and more unified country. Great Britain launches an industrial revolution. Americans took their first steps into the industrial age by building on the innovations of the British. In the 1730s, English inventors started making mechanical devices that sped up cloth production. For centuries, textiles had been made by hand, slowly and methodically by skilled weavers. When John Kay invented a flying shuttle that mounted the weaving shuttles on a wooden track, workers could produce finished textiles much faster. The new looms worked so quickly that seamstresses could not keep up with the demand for thread in their old spindles. Enter James Hargreaves, a poor weaver who found a solution to this problem with the new invention he called the spinning jenny. This device could spin 16 strands of thread at once. Plenty of cloth-making material was now available for the new flying shuttles. By the 1760s, inventors had discovered how to harness the energy of moving water. Connected to paddle wheels dipped into fast-flowing rivers, new power looms and thread spinners turned out ever greater quantities of cloth. English industrialists soon gathered the new machines together and placed them under a single roof. In these massive buildings called factories, great numbers of workers toiled away at power looms and spinners for as many as 16 hours a day. The new textile factories proved far more efficient than the individual workers weaving cloth at their own pace in an isolated home. Mass-produced factory cloth could be made at a much lower cost than homemade cloth. Soon, the independent weavers could no longer compete, and most went out of business. Other industrialists quickly copied the factory model. Numerous factories cropped up along England's rivers, manufacturing everything from bullets to pins. Getting the goods to market. It was one thing for factories to produce larger quantities of goods. Without a market economy, these goods would go unsold. So the British developed better ways to move new products to potential buyers. In the early 1800s, England's dirt roads turned into mud at the first drop of rain. Then John McAdam, a Scotsman, designed raised roads but layered crushed rock, which allowed for drainage on rainy days. On these smoother macadam roads, as they came to be called, merchants could haul heavier loads with fewer horses. Macadam roads made travel safer, faster, and easier, thus reducing the cost of getting farm products and manufactured goods to market. Even before macadam, introduced his improved roadways, a wealthy Englishman, Francis Egerton, the Duke of Bridgewater, recognized that it was easier to move heavy cargo over water than land. In 1759, he began work on a canal to transport coal speedily from his mines to the rising industrial center of Manchester. Opened in 1761, the Bridgewater Canal was essentially a wide, shallow, water-filled ditch cut into the earth. Alongside it, a dirt path allowed mules to tow heavy barges back and forth from the mine. Eventually, similar canals crisscrossed the English countryside. Powered by steam. England's Industrial Revolution culminated with the invention of steam-powered engines. These complex devices required only water and a heat source to produce energy. The first effective steam engine, developed by a young Scottish inventor named James Watt, burned coal and produced tremendous amounts of portable energy. The steam engine liberated new machines from the limits imposed by water wheels, human hands, and horses. Watt designed various steam engines to perform many tasks, from pumping water out of mines to operating factory machinery. By 1800, England had become the most important industrial power on earth. English factories mass-produced so much cloth and iron and so many consumer goods, everything from silverware and picture frames to clothing and toys, that the country was nicknamed the workshop of the world. From new technologies like the power loom and the steam engine, to new transportation advancements like the macadam roads and canals, to new methods of factory production, the English Industrial Revolution transformed that country's old rhythms of life. The days of individual craftsmen producing goods at home or in small shops were numbered. A new world of clockwork precision and wage labor was emerging. To protect their interests from foreign competition, English legislators passed laws making it illegal to export some of the new machinery. They even wrote a law forbidding anyone who knew how to make a power loom from leaving the country. But that did not stop some crafty Americans. American innovators and imitators. Thomas Jefferson once noted, "In Europe the object is to make the most of their land, labor being abundant, and here it is to make the most of our labor, land being abundant." Living in a country with vast amounts of land but relatively few people, Americans valued anything that saved on labor costs. When Jefferson, a lifelong amateur inventor, visited France in the 1780s, he noticed that the European plows, while superior to those used in America, could still be improved. Upon his return to the United States, he designed a better model. His improved plow lifted the soil and moved through the ground faster and more efficiently. Following his precise blueprint, people who did not have detailed knowledge of this mechanical engineering could produce copies of Jefferson's plow. This, in a nutshell, was the American genius. With one eye on recent, mainly English developments, creative Americans searched for new ways to make things better. Jefferson improved on a machine that could copy a document onto another piece of paper as he wrote. He invented a bookstand that could hold 5 open books at once, revolving in place to save time when doing research. He designed his own house in Monticello, Virginia, and filled it with time and labor-saving inventions. Samuel Slater brought the revolutionary concept of English factory production to the United States. A mill superintendent in England, in 1789 he left for the United States in search of fame and fortune. Since it was illegal for British factory managers to export their knowledge abroad, Slater disguised himself before sailing to America. In Rhode Island, Slater set up a textile mill that was the first of its kind in the United States, spinning cotton yarn with water-powered machines that could process up to 80 strands of thread at once. He employed whole families but usually gave the salary to the father, thus preserving the traditionally accepted family structure. Over the next 4 decades, Slater himself amassed a fortune approaching $750,000. Americans took their first steps on the road to industrial development in the 1780s. Then, Jefferson embargoes and the War of 1812 sped up the pace. Because of the war, Americans were temporarily unable to import British goods. To compensate, they increased their own production of textiles and household products. Enabled to trade with Britain, many American merchants converted their shops to factories. American iron foundries, which before the War of 1812 had produced about 5,000 tons of ore, put out 180,000 tons a year by 1830. In Delaware, a French immigrant, Euthere DuPont, started a gunpowder mill that churned out huge quantities of the explosive material for the U.S. military. After the War of 1812, even Thomas Jefferson, who cherished a vision of a nation of independent farmers, wrote that experience has taught me that manufacturers are now as necessary to our independence as our comfort. Okay, we'll stop here with this recording and start up in the next segment with the emerging factory system in New England.